Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we are talking about something you have probably heard, but maybe never fully understood. Yes, RESTful APIs. Let's break it down step by step. You might hear developers say, is this API RESTful or we need a REST API? So let's keep it very simple. So consider REST is like a set of good habits, or we can say rules that we follow when building APIs. Well, it is not a tool, it is just a smart way of organizing how things work between systems. So, in simple terms, if we design our API using the REST rules or architecture, like naming things properly, using the right methods, sending clean data, and so on. By this way, we are going to get REST API. REST is like following a recipe. If we stick to the steps, we get a tasty dish. And here our final dish is our REST API. So if we want our REST API to be tasty or perfect, we need to follow the REST rules. That is what you require to understand. So instead of building APIs in random ways, REST help us to do the same thing in a structured, predictable, and clean manner. It tells you, listen, this is how you should structure your URLs. This is how you should use HTTP methods like get, post, put, delete. And this is how you should send and receive data. Usually, we use JSON format. So whenever you hear someone say REST API, they are talking they are just talking about an API that was built following the REST pattern. That's it. Okay. Now the next we will discuss how this REST structure works with endpoints, methods, headers, and data. So the first thing we need to talk about is the endpoint. Endpoint is like a specific address, or we can say a page in a book. In simple terms, endpoints are the URLs, or we can say the address where your API lives. There are two popular structures that we generally follow. The first one is that you might work with URL like domain name slash endpoint. If you look at this example where www.api.movies.com/movies/list. The first part, the first part is the domain name and the second one is the endpoint. Similarly, second one that we generally follow is the structure that we follow is that your domain name slash API slash your endpoint of your choice. And here also in this examination, the first part is the domain name and the second one is the endpoint. So when you hit that address, you expect something specific like a user list or you want a product info. For more clarity, look at these endpoints, how these endpoints are structured and how they are followed. For example, if you want a list of all movies, you hit the endpoint like slash movies slash list. And at the left hand side, you will find the complete URL. Again, the same thing. The first part is the domain name and the second one is the endpoint. And this endpoint is basically the same, whatever we have defined under the endpoint. And by this way, you can get a list of all the movies. But if you want info on specific movie, say with ID 201, then you go to slash movies slash 201. So here 201 is the movie ID, and that is again the complete URL. Similarly, in case if you want to read or post views for a movie, so there is an endpoint for that as well. Like if you get all the reviews for a particular movie where movie ID is 201, then you can use endpoint movies slash 201 slash reviews. But if you want to add the review for the particular movie that is 201, then we need to use the endpoint movie slash 201 slash reviews slash review. Okay. And for user, you can manage profiles, login and logout. So if you want get or update profile of a user with ID 887, so we can use this endpoint. And for login and logout of the user, we can use auth slash login and auth slash logout. So it means organizing your API using clear and predictable paths. The second thing we need to talk about is methods. Whenever you interact with an API, it means you are basically asking the API to do something. It's similar to when we talk to people. Sometimes we ask for information and sometimes we share information with others. The same thing happens with an API as well. These kind of actions are referred as CRUD. CRUD is basically stands for create, read, update, and delete. Each of these actions uses a different HTTP request method. So if you look at it here for read, the HTTP method is get. Similarly for create, the HTTP method is post. And similarly for others also. Get is basically for reading or getting information. Post is for creating new elements or new record. Patch is to partially update existing element. Whereas put for updating whole element, it means to replace the whole thing with new data, even if some fields remain the same. Delete for deleting any element or record. All right. Now that we have understood the methods like get, post, put, patch, and delete, let's move one step further. There are usually two types of URLs we use when working with these methods. Let's take an example to understand this. Say we are building an app like IMDB, a movie database. The first type of URL is used for actions like get and post. Typically, when we are dealing with an entire collection, like if you want to add a new record or new movie, or you want to see all movies, you can do that using a post and get request. And in both cases, the REST path would be API slash movie. The second type of URL is more specific. It's used for action like get, put, patch, delete. So when we want to work with a single item, for example, a specific movie by its ID. So here ID is 127. So the REST path would be slash API slash movie slash 127. And it's for all, even for get, put, patch, and delete. So if you want to get details of specific movie, just use a get request with movie ID. So if we want to retrieve one movie, then we use this REST path. And here the rest part will be, as I already told earlier, API slash movie slash 127. Whereas above get, we use is to retrieve all the records, all the movies. I hope that this difference being very clear. This get is basically to retrieve one movie, and this get is basically to retrieve a list of all movies. Similarly, if you want to update the rating of movie under 127, then you would use a patch or put request, depending on whether you are updating part of the data or the whole thing, right? Here we are partially updating, and input we are updating the whole data. And if you want to delete a specific movie, you got it. That's a delete request on the same path. Okay. So what I want to say it here is that this post and get, we are going to use the rest part. So this is basically when we need to add a new movie to the collection. And this is when we want to retrieve a list of all movies. For other, if we want to retrieve one movie or a specific movie, we are going to use the get. And if we want to update or partially update, we are going to use put and patch. And similarly, if we need to delete the particular movie, so for all we are going to use the following rest paths. So depending on the actions you want to take, the structure of the URL changes a little. Hope now it is clear to how different method works. It is pretty much straightforward. We will keep using this again and again in the upcoming lessons. So you will get super comfortable with them as we go along. Okay. So let's talk about headers in a REST API. So first to know is what are headers? Well, think of headers as a little nodes or tags that travels along with your API request or response. They don't carry the main data, but they tell the API how to handle that data. It's kind of like sending a letter with an envelope that says, hey, this is in JSON, or this request is authorized, or please respond in English. In short, we can say headers make sure your request is handled properly, securely, and in the way you expect. Now you might be wondering, where do I even find these headers? When you make an API call, whether you are using tools like Postman, browser tools like Swagger UI, or even code, headers are usually added in a separate sections. That is, we call it as headers. So if you look at the Postman tools, basically, say first thing is that basically how, because this tool is for the testing purpose. So we call the API here. So if the user needs to log in, so we might have this kind of URL. Or if we want to see all the movies, so here we have to select the get, and we will basically see, we can retrieve all the movies here. Or if you want a particular movie, then we can write the say 127 or whatever. We can write it here also. Similarly, if you want to post to add new record, then we can select the post here, and in the body, we need to write the JSON and then click the send. So this way, basically, we can add the record or post the record. Right? Hope this gives basically a fair idea. We will discuss it later as well. So now we are talking of the headers. So headers are basically, there is a dedicated header tab is there. You can see the authorizations. So here authorization is like token and the access token code. Okay. And you can see also nine hidden. These are basically the hidden adders that automatically be the part of our API. So like suppose the content type is application and the JSON. Similarly, other things are there that you can find it on. Hope that gives a fair idea about what exactly the headers are. Okay. So now you will see something like this as we have already seen under the header section. So there being a content type like application and JSON. In the authorization, we saw token and the access token. Similarly, the accept and the application JSONs and all that. Right? So now let's quickly see how to use headers in code. If you are using Python with the request library, so it's a simple way. So if you look at the code, so there is a basically the headers as we have discussed it. And that is basically, and these are the response that contains your URL with the endpoint along with the headers. That's it. Just define your headers and attach to the request. I hope it is quite easy. All right. Now let's talk about the data we actually send in a REST API. So this part is called the body or the table. And we have seen how headers carry extra instructions with our API call. But what about the actual data we want to send or receive? That is where the body comes from. Think of the body like a main content inside a parcel. If headers are the envelope details, the body is what's actually inside the box. The body, or we can say the payload, contains the actual data that you are sending, like a new user's detail, a movie title, and rating or login credentials. Now, what kind of data goes in the body? Usually, it is structured in a format like JSON, but sometimes it can be XML or form data, depending on the API. But in the form of cases, in most of the form, we use JSON. So if you look at it here, if you look at the code, like we have movie title, description, the platform, the active flag. So you include this data when you are making request like post. That is to create something means to create a new record, or for put or patch, that is to update the existing record. So one thing you should notice that get and delete requests usually don't have a body. They rely on the URL and headers. So where do you actually add the body? So if you are using the tools like Postman or Swagger, so you will find a dedicated tab or section called body. So if you look at the Postman one, similarly like headers, we have a body tab also. So in this basically, say we have a different formats are here. We can have XML, we can have JSON, JavaScript and other. But generally we are using the JSON format. So this is the body which being the which being the dedicated tabs. So here we can basically include the JSON one. And then if we need to add the record, we can say post and then click the send and it will basically add the record to the database. Well, so if you are writing code like Python with the request library, so you just pass the body as a part of your request. So here is how code looks like. So this is how we actually send data using a post request in Python. So first we got a simple data dictionary. This is a data dictionary. We are sending a movie title and its rating. Then we define the headers. In this case, we are telling the API that our data is in JSON format using content type, that is application slash JSON. Finally, we make the actual API call using the request.post. So we pass in the endpoint URL and the headers. So this way, with just a few lines, we are sending data to an API. Now, don't worry if this feels new. For now, just get the idea that this is how we pass data into an API. Thank you very much.